This is the Sony F1.8 50mm FE lens, and here's why I wouldn't recommend that you buy this lens for weddings. Now, to start off this video, I'm going to say that originally I did not buy this lens for wedding use. However, as I've started to shoot weddings, I started to use it and I've now taken it out of my roster just because I don't think it's fit for wedding use, and so I'm going to go over those reasons in this video. The other thing I'd like to mention is so far I've only shot 3 weddings in total, so I'm by no means a wedding expert, but just from my own experience, this is why I don't recommend you buy this lens at all for weddings. The first and probably the most major con is the autofocus. Now, I know in my last video I talked about vintage lenses that have manual focus and how I love them. However, when it comes to weddings, you really need to have autofocus to pick up on those quick key moments, because you want them to be sharp and in focus, and you also have to capture those quickly. Now, the thing is, with these kinds of shots you can't always rely on manual focus, because while manual focus is more reliable, it is also slower. So, when it comes to a wedding, you need to have fast and reliable autofocus. And personally, in my experience, this lens does not provide that. Don't get me wrong, when it focuses on something, it gets it tack sharp and you get a really nice image. However, I've just had so many cases where I'm shooting photos and so many of them are out of focus just because the lens isn't able to pick up on them quickly enough. This lens was already famous for not having the best autofocus. However, with firmware updates, the autofocus has gotten better, but in my experience it's still not good enough for weddings. This is disappointing, especially when you compare it to the Canon 50mm, which is known for having pretty good autofocus and being totally reliable for use at weddings. Now, the second con I've experienced is that it has quite a lot of fringing. Now, by that I mean it creates the color aberration on like the edges of stuff in your frame or in your photos. Now, while yes, this can be fixed in post, it is a nuisance to do, and it's just an extra thing that you have to factor in. Not to mention that in some cases it is quite hard to remove, and that by trying to remove it you may actually destroy other parts of the image. There have been many times where I tried to remove the fringing and instead it just removed colour from the subject's skin. And so in that case I just really don't think it will be the best for weddings, especially when you have varied lighting conditions. Now, my third and final con is the price. Now, when I bought this lens, I bought it used for £130. Nifty 50s are known for being cheap. They're called Nifty 50s because they're cheap and they're reliable. However, for £130, this lens is on the slightly pricier side of 50mm lenses. In comparison, I could buy the Canon F1.8 50mm lens for only about £80–90 used. And not only would it be cheaper, it would probably perform better too. Now, that being said, I have a Sony and I love my Sony and I love the Sony camera system, so I would have to buy the Sony lens. You can buy adapters to adapt the Canon lens, but overall there is some performance issues with that. It works great, but it's not for everyone, and the autofocus isn't always as quick as it should be. So what that means is that to get this 50mm lens, you have to spend quite a lot more and you're not getting as much in return. So those are my reasons why I don't think this lens is fit for weddings. However, I will say I do still love this 50mm lens. When it gets good shots, it does them really well. I love the way some of my images have turned out using this lens. That being said, like I said earlier, I don't think it's great for wedding use, and so I've taken it out of my wedding photography and videography roster. If I need a 50mm lens for video, I can obviously use manual focus and I'll probably use my vintage lens. However, I've recently, because of this lens not working for my needs, I've gone ahead and I've bought a Samyang 35mm f2.8, which is what this video is currently being filmed on. All of the talking head segments of this video were shot on the Samyang 35mm f2.8 using autofocus. So let me know what you think of the autofocus and whether, it seems fairly reliable or not. I'm hoping to replace my 50mm lens for this Samyang 35mm lens in my wedding roster. I'll probably still keep the 50mm as I have it and it can be useful in some cases. However, I don't plan to use it for weddings anytime soon. So that's all for today's video. Let me know what you guys think about this lens. Would you be willing to buy it? Would you use it for weddings? Would you not? Do you agree with what I said? Do you disagree? I'd love to hear your thoughts in a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.